Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Seasons Cast, a Canadian Highlander podcast. We may not be Canadian, but we do hopefully live near enough to Scotland for that to count towards something. I'm your host, Tom, better known by friends, allies, and enemies as Wilko, and with me is my co-host, Aaron, better known by friends, allies, and enemies as Aaron.
Hello!
So, Aaron, first off, tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Aaron. I've been playing since Born of the Gods. I thoroughly enjoy terrible creature decks. Traditionally, either small green creatures or Delver decks. Love using basically anything blue, green, and red, pretty much.
And I'm Tom. I'm an Abzan man, Sultai man, mid-range player, control player. I play a little bit of everything, but I like my games to go on a little bit longer, for there to be lots of interaction, and hopefully for me to flood my opponents in value. We'll probably mention what decks we enjoy in Canadian Highlander in a little bit, but first of all, Aaron, what is Canadian Highlander?
Canadian Highlander is a 1v1 100-card singleton format. Everyone starts on 20 life, there's no commanders or anything akin to that. It follows a vintage ban list, which means you can play whatever card from any era of Magic that you want to play in your deck.
So, when you say any card, Black Lotus?
Yep.
Moxen?
Yep.
Time Walk?
Absolutely.
Ancestral Recall?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Right, I'm just going to go and put those all in the deck then.
Not so fast. There is a little bit of balance in it. You can't just stick all of the power in one deck. That would be a little bit good. So the council that designed the rule list for this have created a points list. You get in total 10 points for your 100-card deck, and you can get various different points for each card. For example, Black Lotus would be 7, whilst you can have the Moxen at 4. So you can't put all of them in the same deck and have like this absolutely insane deck similar to how Vintage have a restricted list. And all of the Power 9 are auto-includes.
Yep, just some quick sort of points. There's also no sideboards in this format. The 100 cards you have are the 100 cards you get. The Moxen are in fact 3 points as well, so you can actually have 3 of them in a deck, which you quite commonly see in mid-range decks.
Apologies.
Yeah, that's fine. But yeah, it means that this format, I'm just going to come out and say it, this is, in my opinion, the most balanced format I have ever played. Although there are cards like Oko in this format, fully enough, that are not pointed, and we'll get onto why in probably the next episode. You don't really have things like single strategies, single color combinations dominating the format. Blue is very clearly the most powerful color in the format. It's almost like blue is the most powerful color in Magic the Gathering TM. But the council, as they're called, the people over in Victoria in Canada, where Canadian Highlander originated, have done just this incredible job balancing the format, and the points list is constantly being updated. So, for instance, the big examples of 2019 were that at the start of the year, Sol Ring was 3 points, and if I remember correctly, Mana Crypt was 2, which is, just looking back, seems ridiculous. And by the end of 2019 and into 2020, they are now 4 points apiece, because in 2019, people realized that Sol Ring and Mana Crypt were incredibly powerful cards and allow you to do stuff like play 2-drops on turn 2, which is kind of insane. And so, the council looked at that and are like, right, those cards are becoming too good, we'll up their points. And sure enough, those decks, medium decks as they were known, haven't died out, they are no longer like really problem decks. They're just a part of the format now. Similarly, the printing of Wrenn and 6 meant that Strip Mine got a point increase, and suddenly there's less decks relying on strip blocking people and stuff like that. For a while, the card Protean Hulk and the card Flash were 3 points and 7 points respectively, so you couldn't play a bunch of the other pointed tutors, so you could just combo people as quickly as possible. It's like they're constantly looking at and evolving the format and finding out problems, and sometimes they try things out and it doesn't work. Last year, the points changed so that you could play Demonic Tutor and Black Lotus in the same deck, and DT Lotus Storm, as it's funnily called, just started becoming way too good, and so they made Demonic Tutor 4 points, kept Black Lotus at 7, and obviously, because 10 points are the maximum, you can no longer play both. And now the format's significantly healthier for it. I will say that this is going to come up a lot in this podcast. We are two Brits who fell in love with the Canadian Highlander format from the second we, started playing it. So we're not really going to have like the meta game analysis or the know-all of things that are going on in Victoria, Canada. But I especially keep up with the format. I follow Benjamin Wheeler, who is the poster child, the god, if you will, of Canadian Highlander. And listening to him talk and listening to the North 100 podcast that Loading Ready Run do. Yeah, we just decided that we just love this format. We love talking about it. And so we wanted to make a podcast about it. So we've gone through the points list. We've gone through sort of what the format is. Like Aaron said, it's 1v1, 20 life. This is not Commander. That's the most important thing, I think, to state. There are so many people who, when I tell them it's a 100-card singleton, so it's like Commander. No, there is nothing like color identity. Because you don't have a Commander, you don't have that like build-around card. There are decks, like for instance, there are decks that play Urza, who was printed in 2019, as one of the sort of the powerful engine cards, but he's not always there, and there's only one copy of him, so they need to be like careful with it. It's not like in Commander where you can just throw your Commander out. If it dies, I've got it back. Like I brought Oko up earlier. Oko is obviously this card that has dominated Magic. Never mind, standard, modern, blah 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 blah. It's just dominated Magic at the moment. But there's only one copy of it in Canadian Highlander, so once it's gone, obviously there are cards like Eternal Witness and stuff that can bring it back. But for the most part, once it's gone, it's gone. And that leads to really interesting deck building. The lack of a sideboard plan also does that. If you struggle against mono red, then you need to change your main deck. It's not like you can just side timely reinforcements, feed the clan, stuff like that. It leads to deck building where every card can matter. So that leads to it being a really competitive format, as you'd probably imagine. But at the same time, you can play what you want. People like Wheeler, when he streams, I've shown that he's played ninjas. He's played Relentless Rats deck. He's played Mia Tribal recently in a bit of a mean stream. But you can also play decks like Storm, Death and Taxes, Burn, Hard Control. That's why we love this format. You can play whatever you want. To an extent, however you want. Obviously, there is a baseline. But whatever you like playing, whether it be aggro, control, tempo, mid-range, combo, just try it out and see if it works. It's an incredible format. Speaking of decks that you can play in this format, Aaron, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the decks that you enjoy playing?
Okay, so I initially got into Canadian Highlander when I converted my kind of elf ball deck from Commander directly into Canadian Highlander, and kind of rapidly realized that all of these elves work really well together. Obviously, this is a standard kind of concept, but ramping up and playing all the different creatures and eventually slamming an exceptionally large Crater Hoof Behemoth into your opponent is something that is absolute bliss. But more recently, I've kind of switched a little bit from kind of an elf ball particular strategy into a banned value pod deck, where if you're unfamiliar with the term pod, it's in reference to the Magic card Birthing Pod. Using this, we got a bunch of high-value ETB creatures, a high value of kind of ramp, etc. And ultimately, the aim is to repeatedly cast the card Time Walk, which we previously mentioned is quite heavily pointed, but is an absolute all-star in this deck, where you get to loop it with Eternal Witness and link to cards like Ephemerate that came out in Modern Masters? Modern Horizons. Modern Horizons, I do apologize. Where you can constantly blink the Eternal Witness and take infinite turns with Time Walk.
Yeah, essentially how the combo works in that deck. Spellseeker, for instance, in that deck is a one-card win because it goes and gets Ephemerate. You cast Ephemerate, target the Spellseeker, and then you go and get Time Walk, and then you play Time Walk, and then you take an extra turn. And at the beginning of that extra turn, Ephemerate. No, it's not Retrace.
Rebound.
Rebound, thank you very much, yes. Ephemerate rebounds, and you target Spellseeker again. And you go and get a creature tutor that costs 2 or less, whether that be Eladamri's Call, or Finale of Devastation, or Green Sun Zenith. And with that card, you go and get the card Eternal Witness, and return from your graveyard Ephemerate. You then cast the Ephemerate, targeting Eternal Witness, to return Time Walk. And then you cast Time Walk. And then at the beginning of that extra turn, and stop me if you've heard this one, your Ephemerate comes back. And your Ephemerate this time targets Eternal Witness, which returns to your hand, Ephemerate. You then cast Ephemerate, targeting Eternal Witness, and return to your hand Time Walk. And you cast Time Walk. And stop me if you've heard this one before, but at the beginning of your next turn, Ephemerate rebound, and you see how this goes. And yeah, you take infinite turns. The deck is really powerful. I'd say it's a bit of a new hotness. It only sort of really showed up in the last sort of 4 months or so, I believe. But yeah, you sort of fell in love with it instantly. It's a combination of what we both love. We both love value. We both love sort of creature decks. And for me, I like it. It's a bit slow and grindy, and then can win out of nowhere. And for you, as you say, you like these sort of these elf ball decks and stuff like that, which is very similar to the deck's really cool. For those wondering, I'll put the point spread in the video here. But if you're listening to this, I believe, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, the points are Time Walk, which is a 6-point card. Either Birthing Pod or Survival of the Fittest. I believe we're trying Survival of the Fittest at the moment. But again, it's a newish deck. We're giving it a try. Survival of the Fittest and Pod are both 2 points apiece. And then
Spellseeker on 1 point. And we had True Name. That card was a mistake. Card is a disaster. And I love it. But enough about me and my decks. Wilko, what kind of decks are you playing in Canadian Highlander?
As previously mentioned, I'm a mid-range and control player. How I got into this format, I had a 1v1 Commander Leovold deck, because my word, that card. And that deck was just hard control, and then it won with Seasons Past drawing 7 cards, 8 cards, and then your opponent never drawing a card for the rest of the game with Gaia Reach Sanitarium. And I was like, right, I've got this deck kind of how I want it. Let's put a mana drain in it. And then I checked the 1v1 ban list and remembered that Mana Drain is banned. Not my finest moment, I will admit. So, what to do? I know, I'll call up my good friend Aaron. He'll happily try out new formats with me. Aaron, how do you feel about playing Canadian Highlander?
Oh, go on then. What could possibly go wrong?
So similar to you, as you mentioned, you changed your Elf Ball Commander deck, and then sort of from there realised that, Hoof's a deck, I'll give that a try. Funnily enough, in this format where blue is good, Sultai is very playable. It's probably not the best control colours, blue-white X and blue-red X are probably better. Your Grixis, your straight blue-white, they are probably better. But if the name of the podcast and the fact I already mentioned it hasn't keyed you in already, I love the card Seasons Past. Seasons Past, it will be up on screen, but for those listening, 4 green, sorcery. When it resolves, you put it on the bottom as opposed to in your graveyard, which they thought would balance it, but they were wrong. And what you do is you pick a card in your graveyard of each different converted mana cost and put them into your hand. So you get a 0-drop, a 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, yada, yada, yada. That 1-drop is normally a mystical tutor. That 2-drop used to often be a demonic tutor. So you often went to find Seasons Past again, and you just looped it over and over, getting value after time, and you just flooded your opponent with value. And then 2019 came along, and War of the Spark came along, and there was this certain god eternal called Kefnet. And oh my word, I immediately fell in love with Kefnet. Especially because Kefnet goes infinite with either Jason the Mind Sculptor or Sylvan Library, and the card Time Walk. You will notice that me and Aaron both really like Time Walk. It's almost like it's a really powerful card that's one of the most powerful cards ever printed. And yet the second I saw Kefnet, and I tried it out, and it was wonderful. And then the next step was put a Time Walk in my deck. And since then, it's my favorite deck I think I've ever played in any format ever. It's just this grindy, controlling deck that, counters and kills its way through your opponent's stuff. And then all of a sudden, you just flip a Time Walk off the top of your deck with Kefnet and either take infinite turns or, 12 them, 16 them, regrowths in the deck, Seasons Past in the deck. The card Mystic Sanctuary, which for some reason they thought was a good idea to print, is also in the deck as ways to get it on top and recast it. And it's just, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And with that, we're going to move over to our closing segment. This will be a sort of an opening segment, closing segment type thing in later episodes, but we found it best to probably explain what the format was before jumping into any cards. So, the closing segment, every episode we're going to look at 2 cards from a set of our choosing and talk about the sort of applications for them in Highlander. Today, it is January. We are recording this the weekend before pre-release for Theros Beyond Death. So why not choose cards from Theros Beyond Death that we think could be interesting in the format and are perhaps relevant to our interests? Aaron, what card do you have for us today?
I had to give this a bit of thought, but I think the one I'm probably most interested in by a large margin is Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. Uro is 1 green-blue for a legendary Elder Giant, 6/6, and when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless it was escape. And escape is the new mechanic from Theros Beyond Death, where you compare the mana cost and exile X number of cards from your graveyard and play it from your graveyard. However, when Uro enters the battlefield or attack, you may gain 3 life and draw a card, then you may put a land card from your hand into the battlefield. So not only is this a 3-mana 6/6, which admittedly it's much more akin to a 4-mana 6/6, but immediately you're getting a growth spiral effect of drawing a card and putting a land directly into the battlefield, gaining a little bit of life relevant in the aggro matchups. If you can get this to stick around and hit your opponent over and over again, this is such a value engine. It's probably the card I'm most excited for in this entire set.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this card is really, really cool. One thing that viewers/listeners may not be aware of is, as we mentioned, this format is not Commander, and therefore there is one very relevant land that is legal in this format that has me and a few other people, by the looks of things, a little bit concerned about the playability of these cards. Caracas is a very popular card in this format, and while I do love that it's sort of explore with upside, yeah, the popularity of Caracas makes me a bit iffy on this card. Because, yeah, exiling 5 cards is like not a small... Because, for instance, as much as I think this card's cool, and ignoring the whole Caracas thing, for instance, in my deck, my Seasons Control deck, funnily enough, I really like cards in the bin. So I will not be putting this in, because Escape 5 is somewhat impractical when you're also wanting to Seasons Past. I think if in any deck, it could very well possibly work out in your Bant deck, especially with like Survival of the Fittest, being able to like put it in the bin and then later in the game you get to play it. Even if it does get Caracas, you still get to cast it for 3 mana again and value it. You can even Caracas bounce it yourself. I'm more than willing to try it out, but whereas a lot of formats have the Bolt check, the Wasteland check, stuff like that when it comes to like lands and stuff like that, our format has all of those as well, but it also has the Caracas check. So any legendary creature where you need to cast it, you need to cast it sort of once to get it in the bin, and then again at a real cost. We'll see. I'm definitely up on it. Not necessarily for Canadian Highlander, but we will see indeed.
But that was my pick for Theros Beyond Death. But go on, what's yours? What are you most excited to try out in Canadian Highlander from the new set?
Ashiok Nightmare Muse. So, Ashiok Nightmare Muse, 3 blue-black for a legendary Planeswalker Ashiok. +1. Create a 2/3 blue and black Nightmare creature token with whenever this creature attacks or blocks, each opponent exiles the top 2 cards of their library. -3, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, then that player exiles a card from their hand. And -7, you may cast up to 3 face-up cards your opponent owns from exile without paying their mana costs. It enters with 5 loyalty. So, other than the fact that this card looks gorgeous and will immediately be added to my Raymond Swanland collection, this card just seems really neat. Like it protects itself by creating a creature every turn. It can obviously bounce any permanent, which is good for like any pesky like enchantments, artifacts, or even creatures. Sultai can deal with all of them. It can definitely deal with creatures, but every so often there's an annoying artifact or enchantment that you sort of have a little bit of trouble getting rid of. That works. If it's the last card in hand, you even get to exile it with Ashiok's own ability, which is fantastic. Note as well that the -3 also interacts favorably with the -7, which is really cool. Making a 2/3 is like nice and relevant. The fact that it triggers when it attacks or blocks is nice. If you're against like a combo deck or something like that, you can, hopefully maybe hit some of their important pieces. Like I say, the -3 deals with any non-land permanent. It's not like Jace the Mind Sculptor where you're dying to, say, a Paradox Engine player about to go off next turn and you're like, damn, I wish I could bounce that Paradox Engine. It's like, no, you can. She just seems real good, and I'm excited to maybe try her out in Sultai.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think one of the things I really like about Ashiok is the fact that because she comes in on 5, upticks twice and goes straight into the -7.
Yeah, her ultimate being quick is really super neat.
She's definitely the most interesting Planeswalker out of the set.
I think that'll do it for this episode, really. A little bit of a shorter episode, but we just wanted to dip our toes into the water, see how people like this, introduce people to the format, which, if you are interested in playing, CanadianHighlander.wordpress.com is the Canadian Highlander website. we have to give a shout out to Loading Ready Run, North 100, and I have to give a personal shout out to Ben Wheeler, especially for his streams and just being a generally awesome person. Seeing the love and success that he's had, that the format's had, there is love out there for this format, and that just made me really, really excited to just talk about it to anyone who's willing to listen. Next episode, our plan is to do a little bit of a deep dive into the points list, the reasonings that why cards might be where they are, whether we think some cards should be on it, whether we think some cards should be less points, more points, etc. That's probably what's coming up next episode, which will be a little bit longer. If you have reached it to this point, thank you so much. It means so much that you're willing to listen to two English people talk about a Canadian format that just deserves more love. Go out, play it, try it out, get your friends. Like I say, me and Aaron, it took us half a game to realize that this format was something special.
Oh yeah.
And if you want to talk to us about the format, you can find me at Force of Wilko. Aaron, where can they find you?
You can find me at Twitter at The Mighty Shaka.
And we will hopefully see you next time. Bye.
Bye.